We had camped just a little farther from Barragata, the crossroads, and my section were assigned to check at the checkpoint to see which direction, see if any Japanese were going through and the directions they get, and check all the civilian personnel. But that was after we passed, after the major. We were still going, we were still fighting. And the major, after we passed through again, Guam and got down further, we had they had secured, so-called secured the island. But the Japs were still there. They were there for years later. So we got the word that there was several Japanese, I think it was 5 or 6, I forget, running through, and they told us where they were located. And Baker and I went down and located them and wiped them out. That's about all there was to it. Well, I had a 45. Baker had a 45. That's all we had.
And there, how many of them? 6?
There's 4 of them.
4.
Yeah. Well, they were just trying to hide. They weren't trying to kill anybody. But they wouldn't surrender either. So when they didn't surrender, we just started shooting. Well, that's all we had. We had just had 45s for the post that we were watching, you know, to check the traffic and see if people are going where they're supposed to be going. Before we went over to the other side of the island, we kept going down the south end, and that's when we were going down to the amphitheater, is what they called it. And we had a little fun there. As we were going down, we ran into some resistance, and there was tank resistance and everything else. But we stopped. When it got almost dark, we stopped and dug in, and the forward observer was sent forward for the mortar section. We went up where the troops were, up in line with the troops, but we were on a road. And we dug in. When they told us to dig in, we dug in a road and hit solid coral rock. So we just widened it out, and Butch, Domilovich, and I could get those names because we all three came out alive. I ran into Domilovich years later on Okinawa when I was stationed down there. But we dug in and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, a Japanese tank would come rumbling down the road, and they stopped right above us. They could see our tanks farther down because they were behind us. We dug as deep as we could, but the next morning we were a little deeper from shaking all night. That Japanese tank was right over us, and they didn't know we were there, but they couldn't shoot us because our people couldn't shoot the tanks because we were there. They knew where we were. Our tanks knew where we were. And the Japanese tanks had no idea, but if they had, they could have backed up and killed every one of us. And we were kind of shook up all night. All I know is they still couldn't shoot, and the tank got away. And we were still there. Yeah, that was the scariest thing that happened to me personally. That was the closest I came to getting killed, really, the way I feel. But Domilovich was on one side, Butch was on the other, I was in the middle, and they were both deeper than I was the next morning. So, but it was, again, I was young, I didn't know what fear was. While we were on Guam, we were coming back, and my platoon company was going back in reserve. to take a break. The only way back, we come on the mortar fire from the Japanese. And of course, Japanese had been on top of the hill. Our people had been on top of the hill. And there were foxholes on top of the hill. When we started getting the incoming from the Japanese, this guy, I jumped into a foxhole, and all of a sudden, I didn't know what was going on. Somebody was on top of me, and Henry M. Baker was on top of me. If it wasn't for the parapet around the foxhole, we could have very easily been killed, because a mortar shell landed in the parapet, and it was a dud. And I was talking to Baker back in the 90s. I was traveling from California to Missouri. I found out where he was. I went in to see him, and he'd retired from the Santa Fe Railroad. And we started talking about old times and things that had happened. And he brought that up, the fact that he jumped on top of somebody in a foxhole. And I said, he couldn't remember who it was. I said, Henry, that was me. And Henry was a pretty heavy boy then. I mean, he was pretty about seer size. And he had to run on top of me. I mean, things like that, it's funny now. But we could have both been dead. We went farther south, I think it was south, then we went farther down toward the point, down into the amphitheater, and cleared that out. As far as we, so long as we could say it was cleared. We didn't know. See, 20 years later, they were still getting Japanese out of there. That was in hiding. It was all over the news, all over the country, in the United States, that they had found some people that had been hiding for 20, 25 years. So, yes, we moved over to the other side of the island, opposite the airfields, and I think they call it Sinahanya, something like that. And they set up a Red Cross camp and everything over there. The only people that had any dealings with the ladies of the Red Cross, as far as I could see, were the officers. When we got finished and secured Guam, we stayed there to train for the next operation. And get our replacements that got killed and so forth, all the equipment, we got restock, everything. And it took quite a while to do that. Well, we were on Guam, let's see, about 8 or 9 months. And we boarded ship and went up to go into Iwo. We didn't know where it was, but that's where we were supposed to be going into, landing.
They trained you for Iwo, and they actually put you on ships and put you right offshore at Iwo?
Right, yes.
And you watched the whole thing go on right in front of you.
You'd watch them. If you saw anything, tell somebody.
So your unit was in reserve at Iwo?
Right. Everybody wanted to go in. Everybody. But they were bringing sick out, they wounded out, everything. Everyone wanted to go. And they just chomp and get the bits. You can see everything going on. Well, as soon as they secured the island, they said it was secured, then they pulled us out.
And sent you where?
Back to Guam. When we
And
got back to Guam, we started training for Japan. That was going to be our next one. Now, in the meantime, while we had gone back down to Guam, Okinawa was being invaded. And I lost a brother on Okinawa.
Let me ask you, what was it like sitting there, day-to-day life, sitting there in that LST off Iwo Jima? Was it?
Wasn't an LSC, it was a ship
Oh, okay.
launch. Everybody was talking about it, and trying to point out different things that they saw on ashore, what was happening. And they brought this one guy in that he cracked up. And last time I was here, maybe I won't start tearing up this time, but that kid he was just out of his mind. He didn't know what was going on. He was crying, calling for his mother and father and everything. I stayed with him a lot. He was from one organization that went ashore. And it was so pitiful to see him.
He knew you were trying to comfort him?
Yes, yes. But they evacuated him farther on. They took him to the hospital.
You know, it sounds like you saw a lot of stuff go on. You saw a guy's head in the street. You saw, you know, a senior NCO you knew with a gut wound.
Well,
The man with what we used to call shell shock
right.
seems to have moved you probably more than anything in the war.
I don't know. But you mentioning that, you asked that question. As we were moving south, we dug in and waiting for the troops to move over before the mortars moved in. And John Nee, he's a cop. Take a break.